The alarms came without warning. High Admiral had served the Empire for 300 years. He had fought in 17 wars. He had watched enemy fleets burn in the cold darkness of space. He had never known fear. But when every alarm in the grand surveillance chamber screamed at once, something cold moved through his chest. He stood frozen for 2 heartbeats. Around him, officers ran to their stations. Screens flickered with red warnings. The sound was terrible, a high, sharp noise that cut through everything. "Report," commanded. His voice was steady, his hands were not. A young officer looked up from her console. Her face had lost all color. "High Admiral, there is a ship in the sacred orbital ring." Felt the cold thing in his chest grow larger. "That is impossible." "I am reading it clearly, sir. One vessel, it appeared. It just appeared. No hyperspace signature, no warp trail, it is simply there." The sacred orbital ring, the most protected space in the entire galaxy. 17 defense networks surrounded Prime, the throne world of the Empire. Gravitational mines filled every approach corridor. Warp interdiction fields made faster-than-light travel impossible within 3 light-years of the planet. Sensor stations watched every particle of dust that drifted near the system. Nothing could reach the sacred orbital ring without being detected. Nothing could survive the journey through those defenses. This had been true for 12,000 years. The Empire had ruled 40,000 star systems for all that time, and no enemy had ever touched there. Until now. "Show me," said. The main screen changed. Against the blue and green curve of Prime, a ship hung in the darkness. It was small, perhaps 200 meters long. Its hull was gray and angular, built without beauty or elegance. It looked crude compared to the graceful curves of vessels. But it was there, in the sacred ring, where nothing should be. "What is it?" asked. "Who sent it?" The young officer worked her console with shaking fingers. "Running identification now, High Admiral." She paused. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. "Speak," demanded. "Sir, the ship is human." The chamber fell silent. Every officer stopped moving. Every eye turned to the main screen. Human, the word echoed in his mind. The humans were a young species from a small world called Earth. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 60 years ago. Their technology was primitive. Their empire, if it could be called that, held perhaps 20 star systems. The High Council had discussed them recently and decided they were no threat. They had placed humanity under a containment order, restricting them to their home system. The humans were supposed to be weak, simple, harmless. Yet here was a human ship, sitting in the most protected space in the galaxy. "How?" whispered. The question was not for his officers, it was for the universe itself. How did they get past our defenses? No one answered, no one could. The communication console lit up. "High Admiral," another officer called, "the human ship is broadcasting a message, audio and visual. They are repeating it on all frequencies." "Play it." The screen changed again. A human face appeared, a female with dark hair and dark eyes. She wore a gray uniform with a symbol on her chest, a blue circle with a white star. Behind her, other humans worked at their stations. They looked calm, almost peaceful. "This is Captain Vance of the United Earth Systems vessel Perseverance," the human said. Her voice was clear and steady. "We come in peace. We mean no harm to the Empire or its people. We are here because we wish to talk. Please respond." The message ended. Then it began again, repeating exactly as before. Stared at the screen. His mind raced through possibilities. A trick, a weapon, some kind of trap, but what could one small ship do against the entire Imperial fleet? Unless there were more ships, unless this was just the first. "Contact the Imperial Palace," ordered. "Wake the Empress, alert the High Council, and scramble every warship in the system. I want that human vessel surrounded within the hour." The officers moved quickly. Messages flew across space. Across Prime, Lights came on in great towers as the Empire's leaders woke to impossible news. In her private chambers, Empress III received the report with cold fury. She was ancient by human standards, over 800 years old, but her mind remained sharp as a blade. She had ruled the Empire for 2 centuries. She had crushed rebellions, negotiated treaties, and guided her people through 3 major wars. Nothing in all her long life had prepared her for this. "Explain to me," she said to the trembling messenger, "how a primitive species with inferior technology managed to reach my throne world without being detected." "Majesty, we do not know. Our scientists are analyzing the data, but—" "I do not want analysis, I want answers." The Empress rose from her seat. She was tall, even for a, and her silver robes flowed around her like liquid metal. "Summon the High Council, immediately." Within 2 hours, the council chamber was full. Admirals, generals, ministers, and advisors filled the curved rows of seats. They spoke in hushed, worried voices. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Empress entered, and silence fell. "You have all seen the reports," she said. "You know what has happened. I want to hear your thoughts." Grand Minister was the first to speak. He was old and careful, a survivor of countless political battles. "Majesty, we must remain calm. Yes, the humans have performed an impressive trick, but it is still just one ship, one small ship against our entire fleet. We should destroy it and send a message to Earth. This kind of provocation will not be tolerated." "And if there are other ships?" Admiral asked. He had come directly from the surveillance chamber. "If the humans can send one vessel here undetected, they can send more. What if they have already positioned ships near our shipyards, our fuel stations, our other core worlds?" The council members shifted uncomfortably. The thought had occurred to all of them. "We would have detected them," said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We should have detected this one," replied. "We did not." War Minister stood. She was younger than most council members, and her eyes burned with intensity. "The solution is simple. We destroy the human ship, then we send our fleets to Earth. We end this threat before it can grow. The humans are few and weak. A single battle group could conquer their entire civilization." "The humans are asking to talk," said a quiet voice. Everyone turned to look at Counselor, the oldest member of the council. She rarely spoke, but when she did, others listened. "Perhaps we should hear what they have to say." "Hear them?" laughed. "They have invaded our most sacred space. They have humiliated us before the entire galaxy, and you want to talk?" "I want to understand," replied. "How did they do this? What do they want? Why did they come with one ship instead of a fleet? These questions matter. Destroying the ship will not answer them." The argument continued for hours. Voices rose and fell. Fists struck tables. Some called for immediate war. Others urged caution. A few suggested that perhaps, the humans deserved a chance to explain. Through it all, Empress listened in silence. Finally, she raised her hand. The chamber fell quiet. "The human ship remains in orbit," she said. "It has made no aggressive moves. It continues broadcasting its message, asking to talk. For now, we will wait. We will watch. We will try to understand what we are facing." "And if they attack," demanded, "then we will destroy them, but I will not start a war based on fear alone." The Empress's eyes were cold, dismissed. The council members filed out, still arguing among themselves. Empress remained behind, staring at a screen that showed the human ship. One small vessel, gray and ugly and crude. It should mean nothing. It should be easy to dismiss. But it had done the impossible, and that changed everything. Far above the planet, the UES Perseverance held its position. Inside the ship, Captain Vance stood on the bridge, watching the warships gather around her. There were already more than 50 of them. Battle cruisers and destroyers, their hulls gleaming with elegant curves and deadly weapons. Each one was larger than the Perseverance. Each one could destroy her ship in seconds. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander, her first officer, They're charging weapons. I see it. Vance's voice was calm. Inside, her heart beat fast, but she had learned long ago to hide her fear. A captain who looked afraid would have a crew that felt afraid. She could not allow that. Should we raise shields? They're already raised. Not that it would matter much if 50 warships opened fire at once. Nodded. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands. He had served with Vance for 10 years. He trusted her completely, even now, surrounded by enough firepower to turn them all to dust. "Do you think they'll listen?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Vance admitted. "But we had to try. Earth gave us no choice." She thought about the message they had received 6 months ago. The declaration. Humanity was to be contained. Their colonies would be taken. Their ships would be confined to their home system. They would be allowed to live, but only as prisoners in their own corner of the galaxy. The other species had done nothing. Some had even supported the decision. Humans were young. Humans were primitive. Humans did not matter. Earth's leaders had gathered in emergency session. They had debated for weeks. War was impossible. They had thousands of ships to humanity's few hundred. Diplomacy had failed before it began. Surrender meant giving up everything humanity had built among the stars. But there was a third option, a desperate, dangerous, possibly insane option. Prove that humans could not be ignored. The Perseverance had been selected for the mission. It was not the biggest human ship or the most heavily armed, but it had something no other ship in the galaxy possessed, a prototype subspace-threading drive. Human scientists had discovered it almost by accident, while other species traveled through hyperspace, using mapped corridors that had existed for millions of years. Human researchers had found another way. They could slip between the layers of normal space, moving through tiny cracks in reality itself. It was difficult and dangerous. The mathematics were barely understood, but it worked. And it was completely invisible to traditional sensors. The Perseverance had left Earth 2 months ago. It had traveled across half the galaxy, past patrols and defense stations, through interdiction fields and sensor nets. No one had seen them. No one had known they were there. Until they wanted to be seen. Another message from the surface, the communications officer reported. Same as before, they're demanding we identify ourselves and explain our presence. Send the same response, Vance said. We're here to talk. We'll wait for them to be ready. Hours passed. The ships continued to arrive. The number grew to 100, then 200. Weapons remained charged but unfired. The Perseverance sat in the middle of the formation like a small gray stone surrounded by glittering knives. On the bridge, the crew worked their stations with quiet professionalism. They had all volunteered for this mission. They had all known the risks. Some had written letters to their families to be delivered if they didn't return. Others had made peace with their gods or their memories, or simply with the cold mathematics of probability. 200 humans against an empire of trillions. It should have been a joke. It should have been impossible. But they were still alive, and they were listening. Vance allowed herself a small moment of pride. Her crew had done everything asked of them. Engineers had kept the experimental drive running through 2 months of continuous operation. Navigators had plotted courses through regions of space no human had ever seen. Everyone had worked together, trusted each other, believed in the mission. This was humanity's strength. Not technology, their technology was still young and rough. Not numbers, they were vastly outnumbered. But will, determination, the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Earth's history was full of impossible moments. Civilizations that should have fallen but survived. Diseases that should have killed everyone but were defeated. Wars that seemed lost but were won. Humans had learned, through thousands of years of struggle, that impossible only meant not yet done. They had ruled their empire for 12,000 years. They had grown comfortable, safe. They had forgotten what it felt like to fight for survival. Humans had never had that luxury. They were still fighting, still growing, still hungry. And now they were here, in the heart of the greatest empire in the galaxy, asking a simple question. What are you going to do about it? As the night cycle began on Prime, Empress stood alone in her private observation chamber. The great window showed the stars, and among them, barely visible, the tiny shape of the human ship. She had read every report. She had listened to every expert. None of them could explain how the humans had done it. Some suggested the ship had been hiding in the system for months, waiting for the right moment. Others proposed that the humans had discovered some ancient technology left behind by a long-dead civilization. A few whispered about spies and traitors, secret allies who had helped the humans slip through. But knew the truth was simpler and more frightening. The humans had done this themselves. Through cleverness and determination and sheer stubborn will, they had found a way past every defense the Empire possessed. If they could do this, what else could they do? She thought about her ancestors. 12,000 years ago, they had been a young species, struggling to survive on a harsh world. They had faced extinction more than once. They had fought and bled and sacrificed to build their civilization. Somewhere along the way, they had forgotten those struggles. They had grown soft, comfortable. They had started to believe that their power was natural, inevitable, eternal. The humans were a reminder that nothing lasted forever. A soft chime announced a visitor, turned to find Admiral entering the chamber. He bowed deeply. Majesty, the human ship continues to wait. No aggressive actions, no attempts to leave. They are patient, observed. That is unexpected. Majesty, I must recommend again that we destroy the vessel. Every hour it remains is an hour of humiliation for the Empire. Word is spreading. Other species are watching. They will think we are weak. And if we destroy it, what then? The humans will build more ships. They will send them to other worlds. Perhaps they already have. Shook her head. No, destroying this ship would feel satisfying, but it would solve nothing. I need to understand what we are truly facing. Then what do you suggest? The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Contact the human ship, she said. Tell Captain Vance that I will speak with her, directly, tomorrow at the first light of morning. His eyes widened. Majesty, that would give them legitimacy. It would suggest that we consider them equals. Perhaps we should, replied quietly. They have earned at least that much. She turned back to the window, watching the distant ship, a tiny gray shape against the infinite darkness, so small, so insignificant. And yet it had shaken an empire to its core. The morning would bring answers, or perhaps more questions. Either way, Empress III knew that the universe had changed. The old certainties were gone. A new age was beginning. And at its center, impossible and undeniable, was humanity. Captain Vance had not slept in 36 hours. She stood in her small cabin aboard the Perseverance, staring at a photograph fixed to the wall. It showed a green valley under a blue sky, Earth, the place she had not seen in almost 3 years. The photograph was old and faded, but she kept it anyway. It reminded her why she was here. A soft knock came at her door. "Come in," she said. Lieutenant Commander entered. His face showed the same exhaustion that Vance felt in her bones. Neither of them had rested since arriving at Prime. "They have responded," he said. "The Empress herself wants to speak with you, tomorrow morning their time." Vance let out a slow breath. "So they're willing to talk." "It seems that way. Though I'd say there are about 200 warships out there that suggest they're also willing to do other things." "That's fair." Vance turned from the photograph. "How's the crew?" "Tired, scared, proud," smiled slightly. "Pretty much what you'd expect. Nobody thought we'd make it this far. Now that we have, nobody knows what comes next." "That makes all of us." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside the small window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, incredibly far away, Earth waited for news. "Do you think they understand?" asked quietly. Do you think they understand what we've done?" Vance considered the question. "I think they're starting to. That's why the Empress agreed to talk. If they truly didn't understand, they would have destroyed us by now. Or maybe they're just curious. Curiosity is good. Curiosity means they want to learn. That gives us something to work with." She moved to her desk and sat down. The surface was covered with data pads and reports, everything they knew about the Empire, gathered from 60 years of careful observation. It was not enough. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for such a short time. They were still learning the rules, still trying to understand the players. They were the biggest player of all. Their empire was ancient and vast, spreading across 40,000 star systems. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, crushing every challenge to their power. Other species survived by serving them or avoiding them. Nobody fought and won. Until now, perhaps. "Tell me again about the containment order," said. He had heard the story before, but he seemed to need to hear it again. Perhaps they all did. Vance nodded. 6 months ago, the High Council declared humanity a threat to galactic stability. They said we were expanding too fast, developing technology too quickly. They were afraid of what we might become. "Afraid of us," laughed bitterly. "We have maybe 500 ships, they have thousands. Numbers aren't everything. They've been watching us since we developed FTL travel. They've seen how quickly we learn, how fast we adapt. In 60 years, we went from 1 world to 20 systems. We built colonies on planets that other species said were impossible to settle. We found solutions to problems that had stumped ancient civilizations. And that scared them. It terrified them, not now but for the future. They looked at where we started and where we've come, and they calculated where we might be in another 100 years, another 1,000. They didn't like the answer." Vance pulled up a document on one of her data pads. It was the official text of the containment order, translated into English by Earth's best linguists. "Listen to this," she said, and read aloud. "The species known as humanity presents an unacceptable variable in galactic development. Their rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion patterns suggest a future capacity for disruption that cannot be permitted. Therefore, effective immediately, humanity is restricted to their origin system. All colonial holdings will be transferred to appropriate stewardship. Human vessels will be confined to designated zones. Violation of these terms will result in appropriate correction." "Appropriate correction," repeated. "That's a nice way of saying they'll kill us." "They won't have to. If we accepted the order, we'd lose everything. Our colonies, our trade networks, our shipyards. We'd be trapped in one system, completely dependent on permission for everything. Within a generation, we'd be nothing, a footnote in galactic history. So we came here instead. It had been the decision of Earth's United Council, made in a closed session that lasted 3 days. The vote had been close. Many had argued for acceptance, for survival at any cost. But in the end, the majority had chosen a different path. They would not submit. They would not hide. They would show the galaxy that humanity could not be contained. The Perseverance had been chosen for the mission because of its experimental drive. Subspace threading was humanity's secret, discovered by a team of physicists working in a small laboratory on Mars. Other species had been traveling through hyperspace for millions of years, using natural corridors that connected distant points in the galaxy. Humans had found a different way, slipping through the cracks between dimensions, moving invisibly through spaces that shouldn't exist. It was dangerous. The mathematics were so complex that only a handful of people in the entire species truly understood them. The drive itself was unstable, requiring constant adjustment. One mistake could scatter the ship across a dozen dimensions, killing everyone aboard in ways that physics couldn't even describe. But it worked, and it was invisible to every sensor the galaxy had ever built. "I keep thinking about the people who made this possible," Vance said. "Doctor, no relation to you, who first proposed the theory. Doctor, who built the prototype. All the engineers and scientists who spent years turning an impossible idea into something real. They're the real heroes of this mission." "They'd probably say you are," replied. "You're the one who flew through 17 defense networks to reach an enemy." "I just sat in a chair and gave orders. The ship did the work." "The ship and the 200 people aboard it." Vance smiled slightly. "Yes, them most of all." She thought about her crew. Chief Engineer Martinez, who had kept the threading drive running through 2 months of continuous operation, a feat that should have been impossible. Navigator Williams, who had plotted their course through regions of space that had never been mapped. Communications Officer Park, who had cracked encryption protocols with nothing but determination and a homemade algorithm. These were her people, volunteers, every one of them. They had known the risks when they signed up. Many had families back on Earth who didn't know where they were or what they were doing. Some had left children behind, parents, lovers. They had given up everything for this mission. And they had succeeded. Against all odds, against every expectation, they had reached prime. Now came the hard part. "What will you say to the Empress?" asked. "The truth," Vance replied. "We're here because we had no choice. We're here because the containment order gave us no alternative. We're here to prove that humanity cannot be ignored. And if she doesn't listen, then we've done everything we can. We've shown them what we're capable of. Whether they choose to understand is up to them." Nodded slowly. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be interesting." That's one word for it. After he left, Vance sat alone in the quiet of her cabin. The ship hummed around her, a constant reminder of the technology that had brought them here. Somewhere outside, the fleet waited, weapons ready, wondering what the strange human ship would do next. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people waiting for news. They didn't know where the Perseverance was or what it was doing. The mission was classified at the highest level, but they knew that something was happening. They knew that humanity's future hung in the balance. Vance had grown up hearing stories about human history, about the ice ages that had nearly frozen humanity into extinction, about the plagues that had killed millions, about the wars that had burned cities and poisoned land. Time and again, humans had faced destruction. Time and again, they had survived. Her grandmother had been a historian, and she had taught young an important lesson. "Humans are not the strongest species," she had said. "We're not the fastest but we never give up. No matter how bad things get, we keep fighting. That's our gift. That's our curse. It's what makes us human." Vance carried those words with her now, across the vastness of space, to the heart of an empire that wanted to cage her species forever. "We never give up." On the surface of Prime, Lieutenant could not sleep. He was young by standards, barely 150 years old. He served in the Imperial Intelligence Division, analyzing data about the Empire's many subject species. It was boring work mostly. The same patterns repeated endlessly: species discovered, species evaluated, species controlled. The Empire's dominance was so complete that actual threats rarely emerged. But tonight was different. Had access to all the reports about the human ship. He had read the sensor logs, the analysis documents, the frantic messages between admirals. He understood what the other officers seemed to miss. This was not just a security breach. This was a fundamental shift in the galaxy's power structure. He sat at his personal terminal, searching through old files. The Empire had been watching humanity for 60 years, ever since they had developed faster-than-light travel. The files contained everything: population statistics, military assessments, cultural analyses, technological evaluations. Reading them now felt something strange. The early reports described humans with contempt, primitive, aggressive, limited. The analysts had dismissed them as just another minor species, destined to serve the Empire or be crushed by it. But the later reports told a different story. Human technology advanced at an incredible rate. Their population grew rapidly across multiple worlds. Their ships, though crude by standards, were remarkably efficient. And there were troubling notes about human psychology, their stubbornness, their creativity, their refusal to accept limitations. One analyst had written a warning 5 years ago. Human development patterns suggest potential for significant future capability. Recommend close monitoring and possible preemptive action. The High Council had responded with the containment order. They had decided to lock humanity away before they became a real threat. It hadn't worked, and now a human ship sat in orbit around the throne world itself. Pulled up more historical files, going back thousands of years. He found what he was looking for, records of this own early history. 12,000 years ago, his people had been different. They had lived on a single harsh world, fighting against nature and each other. They had been desperate, hungry, determined. They had developed their technology not through careful planning but through urgent necessity. They had reached for the stars because staying on there meant death. Reading those ancient accounts saw something familiar. The early had been like humans, struggling, fighting, refusing to give up. When had that changed? When had they become so comfortable, so confident in their power, that they forgot what it meant to fight for survival? The Empire had ruled for so long that they had started to believe their dominance was natural, inevitable. They looked at younger species and saw only primitives, children to be controlled or ignored. They never considered that those children might have strengths that they had lost. Closed the files and stared at the ceiling. He was a loyal officer of the Empire. He had served his entire life to protect interests. But tonight, for the first time, he wondered if the Empire deserved protection. The humans had not come to attack. They had come to talk. They had risked everything to deliver a message. We will not be contained. Part of a part he barely recognized, admired them for it. Aboard the Perseverance, the night shift went about their duties in silence. Chief Engineer Martinez walked the length of the engine room, checking every system. The subspace threading drive had performed beyond all expectations, but he knew better than to trust it completely. The technology was still experimental. One fluctuation, one unexpected feedback loop, and the entire ship could be lost. He stopped beside the main drive housing, a massive cylinder that hummed with energy from another dimension. Inside, forces that human physics barely understood worked together to bend reality itself. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "How are you holding up?" he asked the drive as if it could hear him. It was a habit he had developed months ago. Talking to the machine helped him think. The drive hummed in response, everything nominal. Martinez nodded and continued his inspection. He had been an engineer for 30 years, working on ships that ranged from tiny shuttles to massive carriers. This was his greatest challenge, keeping an experimental drive running for 2 months straight, far from any repair facility, with no backup and no second chances. He had done it. His team had done it. They had made the impossible possible. Now they just had to survive whatever came next. In the medical bay, Doctor reviewed the crew's health reports. Stress levels were high, but that was expected. Nobody had reported serious problems. The crew was holding together. She thought about the training they had all received before the mission. Psychological preparation, they had called it. How to handle extreme stress. How to function when surrounded by enemies. How to keep going when every instinct screamed to run. The training had helped, but what really kept the crew together was something simpler: trust. They trusted Captain Vance. They trusted each other. They believed in the mission. Belief was a powerful medicine. Doctor had seen it many times. Patients who believed they would recover often did, against all medical expectations. Soldiers who believed in their cause fought harder than those who did not. The crew of the Perseverance believed, and that belief had carried them here, to the edge of the impossible. On the bridge, Captain Vance finally allowed herself to rest. She sat in her command chair, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Around her, the night shift crew worked quietly, monitoring systems and watching the surrounding fleet. She dreamed of Earth, green fields and blue oceans, cities full of light and life, children playing under an open sky. That was what they were fighting for, not territory or resources or power. They were fighting for the right to exist, the right to grow, the right to reach for the stars without asking permission. They wanted to take that away. They wanted to cage humanity forever, to keep them small and weak and manageable. They were afraid of what humans might become. Vance understood that fear. She had studied enough history to know what humans were capable of, both the beautiful and the terrible. But she also knew that the answer was not containment. The answer was trust, growth, partnership. Tomorrow, she would try to explain that to an empress who ruled 40,000 star systems. She would try to make her understand that humanity was not a threat to be managed, but a potential ally to be embraced. It was a long shot, perhaps an impossible shot, but impossible was just a word. Humans had been doing impossible things since they first walked upright on the plains of Africa. They would do one more impossible thing tomorrow. The night passed slowly, stars wheeled overhead, ships waited in darkness. And in the silence between heartbeats, the future held its breath. The morning sun rose over Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. In the Imperial Council chamber, the shouting had already begun. "This is madness." War Minister slammed her fist against the ancient table. "The Empress cannot meet with these humans. It will make the Empire look weak. Every species in the galaxy will think they can challenge us." "The Empress will do as she sees fit," Grand Minister replied coolly. "That is her right and her responsibility. Her responsibility is to protect the Empire, not to negotiate with primitives who have invaded our space." "They have not invaded. They have arrived. There is a difference." "A difference?" laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the 17 defense networks they bypassed. Tell that to the thousands of officers who failed to detect a single small ship. This is the greatest security failure in the Empire's history, and you want to reward it with a diplomatic meeting." The council chamber had been built 10,000 years ago, when the Empire was young and fierce. Its walls were carved from black stone, decorated with images of ancient victories. Great windows let in the morning light, illuminating the assembled ministers and admirals. Today, that light revealed faces full of fear and anger. High Admiral stood near the back of the chamber, watching the argument unfold. He had served the Empire for 3 centuries. He had seen councils argue before, about wars, about treaties, about the fate of entire species. But he had never seen anything like this. The council was fracturing. Lines were being drawn. Old alliances were breaking apart as new fears took hold. "We need to know how they did it," said Admiral, commander of the Second Fleet. "Until we understand their technology, we cannot make strategic decisions. Destroying the ship now would eliminate our best source of intelligence." "Intelligence?" shook her head. "What intelligence do we need? They are humans, primitives, we know everything about them." "Clearly we do not," replied, "or we would have seen them coming." This sparked another round of shouting. Ministers accused admirals of incompetence. Admirals blamed ministers for cutting defense budgets. Everyone pointed fingers at everyone else. Through it all, one chair remained empty. The Empress had not yet arrived. In a private room adjacent to the chamber, Empress III prepared for the most important meeting of her reign. Her handmaidens dressed her in formal robes of silver and black, the colors of authority and mourning. She did not know why she had chosen mourning colors today. It had felt right. As they worked, she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Her analysts had spent the entire night trying to understand how the human ship had reached Prime. They had failed. The humans are using some form of dimensional slip technology, the report read. We do not understand the principles involved. Our sensors cannot detect it. Our interdiction fields cannot stop it. We have no defense against this capability. No defense. The words echoed in his mind. For 12,000 years, the Empire had been built on strength, military strength, technological strength, the absolute certainty that no one could challenge them. Now, a species they had dismissed as primitive had developed something they couldn't understand, couldn't detect, couldn't stop. What else had they missed? Majesty, a servant entered with a bow. The council awaits your presence. Let them wait a moment longer, stared at her reflection in the mirror. An old face looked back at her, 8 centuries of life written in silver eyes and weathered skin. She had seen so much, done so much, but she had never faced anything like this. Her ancestors had built the empire through courage and wisdom. They had known when to fight and when to talk, when to destroy and when to embrace. They had turned enemies into allies, threats into opportunities. Could she do the same with the humans? There was only one way to find out. Lieutenant had not been invited to the council meeting. He was too young, too junior, too unimportant. But he had access to the intelligence feeds, and he watched the arguments unfold on a small screen in his office. The council was making a mistake. He was certain of it. They were treating the humans as a problem to be solved, a threat to be eliminated. They were not asking the right questions. Why had the humans come alone? Why had they come to talk instead of attack? What did they really want? Pulled up his analysis of human history. He had spent the night studying everything the Empire knew about Earth and its people. The more he learned, the more fascinating they became. Humans had evolved on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. They had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and plagues. They had fought wars that killed millions of their own kind. They had poisoned their own air and water and land, driving themselves to the edge of extinction. And yet they survived. Again and again, against impossible odds, they found ways to continue. The analyst reports called this stubbornness, called it something else, adaptability. Humans changed. They learned. They refused to accept limitations that other species took for granted. They had been like that once, before the Empire, before 12,000 years of comfortable dominance had taught them that change was unnecessary. Made a decision. He began writing a report of his own, one that challenged every assumption the council was making. He did not know if anyone would read it. He did not know if it would matter, but he had to try. The humans had taught him something. Sometimes you had to act, even when the odds were against you. Sometimes you had to speak the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. Sometimes you had to hope. The council chamber fell silent as Empress entered. She walked slowly to her throne, her silver robes trailing behind her. Every eye followed her movement. Every breath was held. She sat and surveyed her council. These were the most powerful people in the Empire, ministers who controlled entire sectors, admirals who commanded millions of ships, advisors who shaped policy across 40,000 worlds. They looked to her for guidance. They looked to her for strength. Today, she would give them something different. I have listened to your arguments, she said. Her voice was calm, carrying easily through the great chamber. I have heard your fears and your anger. I understand them. But I have made my decision and I will not change it. War Minister opened her mouth to protest, but raised a hand. I will meet with the human captain, not because I am weak, but because I am wise. The humans have done something we cannot explain. They have reached us through defenses that should have been impossible to breach. If we destroy their ship without understanding how they did this, we remain vulnerable. Majesty began. I am not finished. The Empress's voice hardened. The humans are not what we thought they were. We dismissed them as primitives and they proved us wrong. We tried to contain them and they appeared at our doorstep. We have underestimated them at every turn. It is time to stop." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. The galaxy is watching. Every species that chafes under our rule, every rival that waits for a sign of weakness, they are all watching to see how we respond. If we destroy the human ship in a fit of fear and anger, we show them that we can be rattled, that we act without thinking, that we are not as strong as we claim. "And if we talk," Admiral asked, "what message does that send?" "That we are confident enough to listen, that we are wise enough to learn, that the Empire's strength comes not from destroying everything we do not understand, but from understanding it and making it our own." Paused. "For 12,000 years, we have ruled through power. Perhaps it is time to remember that we also rose through wisdom." The chamber was silent. Ministers exchanged uncertain glances. Admirals stared at the floor. Finally, old counselor spoke. "The Empress is right. We have grown comfortable in our dominance. We have forgotten that once we too were young and desperate. The humans remind us of what we used to be. Perhaps that is their true gift." "Their gift," shook her head. "They invaded our space." "They came to talk," replied. "They could have done far worse. Consider, if they can send one ship here undetected, they could send bombs, weapons, assassins. Instead, they sent a messenger. That tells us something important about who they are." "It tells us they are clever," said. "It tells us they know they cannot defeat us in open battle, so they use tricks and deception." "Or it tells us they genuinely want peace," countered. "Not every species thinks as we do. Not every action is a strategy for war." The argument continued, but the fire had gone out of it. The Empress had made her decision, and nothing would change it. In his small office, Lieutenant finished his report and sent it to the intelligence archives. He did not expect anyone to read it. Junior officers rarely had their opinions heard, but he felt better for having written it. The report argued that humanity was not a threat to the Empire but an opportunity. Their technology, their adaptability, their determination, these were qualities they should admire, not fear. Instead of containing humanity, the Empire should embrace them, learn from them, work with them. It was a radical idea. The Empire had spent 12,000 years ruling over other species, not partnering with them. The very concept of treating another species as equals went against everything they believed. But perhaps those beliefs were wrong. Perhaps the Empire's greatest strength was not its power, but its potential for growth. And perhaps humanity could show them how to grow again. Leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. The sky was bright with morning light. Somewhere up there, hidden among the glitter of the defensive fleet, a small gray ship waited. What would happen next? Would the Empress and the human captain find common ground? Would war break out despite everyone's intentions? Would the galaxy change forever, one way or another? He did not know. Nobody knew. The future was uncertain, as it always had been. But for the first time in his long career, felt something he had not felt in decades: excitement. The galaxy was about to change. He wanted to see how. Aboard the Perseverance, Captain Vance prepared for her meeting with the Empress. She had chosen her dress uniform, gray and white, with the blue star of the United Earth Systems on her chest. It was simple compared to the elaborate robes they wore, but it was her best. It would have to do. "The shuttle is ready," Lieutenant Commander reported. "Security team standing by." "Security team," Vance shook her head. "No, I go alone." His eyes widened. "Captain, that's not." "I know what it's not, but think about it. If I bring armed guards, it sends a message. We don't trust you. We expect violence. That's not the tone I want to set. And if it is violent, if they try to capture you, kill you, then the mission fails and you take the ship home." Vance put a hand on shoulder. "I have to trust that the Empress wants what I want. A way forward that doesn't end in war. If I'm wrong, we lose nothing but me. If I'm right, we might gain everything. Was silent for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. I hate this plan. I'm not thrilled about it either. Vance smiled slightly, but it's the only plan we have. She walked to the shuttle bay, passing crew members who stopped to watch her go. Some saluted, others simply nodded. All of them understood what she was doing and why. The shuttle was a small craft, barely large enough for 6 people. Vance climbed in alone, sealed the hatch, and began the flight to the surface. As she descended through the atmosphere, she looked out at the world below. Prime was beautiful, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in complex patterns. It could have been Earth, seen from high altitude. But it was not Earth. It was the heart of an empire that wanted to cage her people forever, and she was flying down to meet its ruler, alone, unarmed, with nothing but words. The shuttle landed on a great platform extending from the imperial palace. Guards surrounded it immediately, tall figures in gleaming armor, carrying weapons that could vaporize her with a single shot. They watched her with cold eyes as she emerged from the shuttle and walked toward the palace entrance. She did not flinch. She did not hesitate. She walked with her head high and her shoulders straight, as if she belonged there. The palace was enormous, halls stretching for kilometers, ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. Artwork covered every surface: paintings, sculptures, tapestries depicting 12,000 years of history. It was meant to intimidate visitors, to remind them of the empire's power and glory. Vance looked at it all and felt only sadness. So much beauty, created by a people who had forgotten how to change. So much power, wielded by those who feared anything they could not control. They had built something magnificent, but they had lost something important along the way. The guards led her to a smaller chamber, still grand by human standards, but intimate compared to the vastness outside. At the far end, seated on a simple chair, was Empress III. She was older than Vance had expected. Her face showed the weight of centuries, lines carved by time and responsibility, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, curious. The door closed. Captain and Empress faced each other across an empty room. Captain Vance said, "You have come a long way. Farther than anyone expected, Majesty." "Yes, that is why we are here." The Empress gestured to a chair across from her own. "Please, sit. I believe we have much to discuss." Vance sat. The chair was larger than she needed, built for proportions, but she adjusted and made herself comfortable. "I want to understand," said. "Why did you come here? Why not send a message? Why not approach through diplomatic channels?" "We tried diplomatic channels," Vance replied. "Your empire refused to listen. You declared us a containment species without even meeting with our representatives. You decided our future without consulting us. We did what we believed was necessary for galactic stability. You did what you believed was necessary for your control." Vance kept her voice calm but firm. "There's a difference." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak boldly for someone surrounded by my fleet. I speak honestly, that's why I'm here. Not to threaten, not to demand, just to tell you the truth and hope you listen." "Then tell me, what is your truth?" Vance took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had led to. 2 months of travel, 17 defense networks bypassed, the fate of billions hanging on her words. "Humanity doesn't want war with the Empire," she said. "We don't want to be your enemies. We want to grow, to explore, to build our own future among the stars. That's all we've ever wanted. And you expect us to simply allow this? A species that has already proven it can reach our undetected. I expect you to consider a different approach, not containment, partnership." Vance leaned forward. "Think about what we've shown you. We found a technology your scientists don't understand. We reached the most protected place in the galaxy without being seen. In 60 years, we went from a single world to a spacefaring civilization. Imagine what we could do in 100 years, 1,000. That is exactly what frightens us. It shouldn't, it should excite you. Vance paused. The Empire has ruled for 12,000 years, but when was the last time you discovered something new? When was the last time you faced a real challenge? You've been so focused on maintaining control that you've stopped growing. Was silent, her face revealed nothing. Humans are different, Vance continued. We never stop. We can't. Every generation faces new problems and every generation finds new solutions. We argue and fight and struggle, but we also learn. We adapt. We become more than we were. And you believe we could learn from you. I believe we could learn from each other. They have 12,000 years of knowledge, experience, wisdom. Humans have 60 years of desperate innovation. Together, we could be something extraordinary. Apart, Vance shrugged. Apart, we're just enemies waiting to destroy each other. The Empress rose from her chair and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Prime spread to the horizon, towers and gardens, monuments and parks, the accumulated glory of. When I was young, she said quietly, my teachers told me that the Empire was eternal, unchanging, perfect. I believed them, we all did. She turned back to face Vance. But nothing is eternal, not even us, perhaps especially not us. Then let us help you change, Vance said. Not as subjects, not as servants, as partners, as equals. Equals, spoke the word as if tasting something strange. That is not a concept my people are familiar with. Maybe it's time to learn. The Empress was silent for a long moment. The fate of two species hung in the balance. Then slowly she nodded. Perhaps, she said, perhaps it is. The meeting between Empress and Captain Vance lasted 4 hours. They talked about history and human. They talked about fear, what drove it, what could overcome it. They talked about the future, what it might hold if they chose peace, what it would certainly hold if they chose war. By the end, nothing had been decided, but something had changed. Two leaders who had entered as enemies left with something closer to understanding. I will take your words to my council, said as Vance prepared to return to her shuttle. I cannot promise they will listen, but I will try. That's all I can ask. There is one thing I must know. The Empress fixed Vance with her ancient eyes. If we refuse your offer, if we choose to continue the containment order, if we choose war, what will you do? Vance considered the question carefully. We'll fight. We'll lose eventually, but we'll fight until the last human ship is destroyed and the last human world is burned. We won't surrender. We can't. It's not in our nature. You would choose extinction over submission. We would choose death over cages. Vance smiled grimly. That probably sounds crazy to you. It sounds, paused, it sounds familiar. My ancestors would have said the same thing long ago. She extended her hand in the human gesture she had read about. Safe journey, Captain. Vance took the hand. Thank you, Majesty, for listening. She walked to her shuttle, surrounded by guards who had orders to protect rather than capture. As she lifted off from the platform, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would work. She was wrong. Admiral had watched the meeting from a distance, fury building in his chest with every passing hour. He was the commander of the Home Defense Fleet, 300 of the most powerful warships in the Empire, tasked with protecting Prime from any threat. For 2 centuries, he had served that duty flawlessly. No enemy had ever touched the throne world under his watch. Until now. The human ship should have been destroyed the moment it appeared. Every instinct, every protocol, every principle of defense demanded it. But the Empress had ordered them to wait, to talk, to negotiate with primitives who had humiliated the entire Imperial Navy. Watched the human shuttle rise from the palace and begin its journey back to the Perseverance. His hands clenched at his sides, his teeth ground together. Enough was enough. Weapons officer, he said quietly, target the human shuttle. His bridge crew went still. They knew this order was wrong. They knew the Empress had forbidden hostile action, but was their commander and they had been trained to obey. "Sir," the weapons officer said carefully, "the Empress has ordered." "I know what the Empress has ordered. I also know what duty demands. That human captain has walked on our sacred world, breathed our air, spoken to our ruler as if she were an equal. That insult cannot stand. Sir, if we fire, the humans will learn their place. The galaxy will see that the Empire still has teeth, and the Empress will thank us once the fury of the moment has passed." Leaned forward. "Fire." The weapons officer hesitated for one terrible second. Then, with shaking hands, he obeyed. A beam of brilliant blue energy lanced across the sky, aimed directly at the small shuttle carrying Captain Vance back to her ship. Aboard the shuttle, alarms screamed. Vance threw herself at the controls, but she knew it was too late. The weapon traveled at the speed of light. By the time the alarm sounded, the beam was already upon her. She closed her eyes. She thought of Earth. The beam struck, and the shuttle lurched violently as something intercepted it. Vance opened her eyes. Through the viewport she saw the impossible, a shimmering field of light extending from nowhere, blocking the attack. The beam splashed against the field and scattered into harmless particles. "What?" she breathed. A familiar voice crackled through her communicator. "Captain, this is the Perseverance. We've got you covered." The shuttle's sensors came back online. Vance stared at the readings in disbelief. The Perseverance had moved. Somehow, impossibly, it had traveled from its position in orbit to directly between her shuttle and the attacking ship in less than a second. "How?" she asked. "Subspace threading, ma'am. Turns out it works for very short distances, too. Very fast." Lieutenant Commander sounded almost amused. "The engineering team has been waiting for a chance to show off." "Despite everything," Vance laughed. "Get me back aboard now." The shuttle accelerated toward the Perseverance. Behind it, the fleet exploded into chaos. Admiral stared at his screens, unable to process what he was seeing. The human ship had moved. Not flown, moved. One instant it was in a stable orbit. The next it was kilometers away, positioned exactly where it needed to be to protect the shuttle. No ship in the galaxy could do that. No technology he knew of could enable such a thing. "All ships open fire," he commanded. "Destroy them." Across the defensive fleet, weapons charged and targeted the small gray vessel. 200 warships prepared to unleash enough firepower to crack a moon. They never got the chance. The Perseverance flickered, there was no other word for it, and suddenly it was somewhere else. Behind the fleet, near the orbital stations above the planet's atmosphere, it appeared in one place, then another, moving so fast that sensors couldn't track it. Weapons fire filled the space where it had been, hitting nothing but empty vacuum. Ships turned to target its new position only to find it gone again. The fleet that had been perfectly positioned to destroy a single vessel was now scattered, confused, firing at shadows. "Track them," screamed. "Find them." "We can't, sir," his sensor officer replied. "They're not using any propulsion we recognize, they're just appearing and disappearing." On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Vance watched the chaos unfold. "Status report," she said calmly. "All systems nominal, Captain," Chief Engineer Martinez reported from the engine room. "The threading drive is performing beautifully. We can keep this up for hours if we need to." "Shields. They've taken a few glancing hits. Nothing serious. Their targeting systems can't predict where we'll be." Vance nodded. The demonstration was working. They were seeing exactly what human technology could do, and more importantly, what it could not do to them if they chose peace. She said, "Open a channel, all frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." "Channel open, ma'am." Vance stood and faced the main screen. Around her, the battle, if it could be called that, continued. Ships fired at empty space. The Perseverance danced between them like a ghost. "Attention all vessels," she said. "This is Captain Vance of the United Earth Systems vessel Perseverance. We have not fired a single shot. We have not damaged a single ship. We have only defended ourselves against an unauthorized attack." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We could have done more. We could have struck your shipyards, your stations, your cities. We could have placed weapons in orbit around you before you even knew we were here. We didn't. We came to prove a point, not to start a war." The Perseverance flickered again, appearing directly in front of Admiral's flagship. For one heart-stopping moment, the human ship hung there, within easy weapons range, completely vulnerable. Then it was gone, reappearing near the edge of the fleet. "That was your warning," Vance continued. "We could have destroyed your Admiral's ship just now. We could have ended his life and the lives of everyone aboard. Instead, we showed you what we're capable of, and what we choose not to do." She took a deep breath. "Humanity does not want to be your enemy, but we will never be your subjects. The next time you see a human ship, remember this moment. Remember that you only see it because we allow you to." She cut the transmission. On Prime, Empress watched the battle from her observation chamber. She had felt the attack the moment it happened. Her guards had rushed to protect her, thinking the humans were striking back. But the reports quickly made clear what had truly occurred. One of her own admirals had violated her direct orders and attacked the human shuttle. And the humans had responded, not with destruction but with demonstration. She watched as the Perseverance danced through her fleet, untouchable, unstoppable. She watched as Captain Vance broadcast her message to the entire system. She watched as the mighty warships of the Empire fired helplessly at empty space. It was, she realized, the most brilliant display of military capability she had ever seen. Not because of the power on display, but because of the restraint. The humans could have destroyed dozens of ships. They could have killed thousands of. They could have turned this moment into a massacre that would have justified any level of response. Instead, they had proved their point and asked for nothing in return. "Contact Admiral," she commanded. "Order him to stand down immediately and have him placed under arrest." "Majesty," one of her aides said carefully, "if we arrest the Admiral, the Military Council will." "The Military Council will do as I command. Admiral violated my direct orders and nearly started a war. He will face consequences." Her voice was cold. "Make sure everyone understands. The Empire will not be dragged into conflict by reckless subordinates." The aide bowed and hurried to obey. Alone again, turned back to the window. The battle, such as it was ending. The Perseverance had stopped its impossible dance and returned to a stable orbit. The fleet was pulling back, regrouping, trying to understand what had just happened. She thought about what Captain Vance had said in their meeting: partnership, equality, a future built together rather than imposed from above. It was a strange idea, foreign, almost unthinkable. But watching the human ship hang peacefully in orbit, surrounded by hundreds of vessels that couldn't touch it, began to think the unthinkable might be the only sensible choice. Aboard the Perseverance, the crew allowed themselves to breathe. They had done it. They had survived an attack by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They had demonstrated their capabilities without killing anyone. They had sent a message that would echo across every inhabited world. Chief Engineer Martinez emerged from the engine room, his face streaked with sweat but his eyes bright with pride. The threading drive held up perfectly. No damage, no fluctuations, nothing. She's a beautiful machine. "You're a beautiful engineer," Vance replied. "I'll put that in my report." "Please don't. My wife will get jealous." The bridge crew laughed, a release of tension that had been building for days. Even Lieutenant Commander allowed himself a small smile. "Captain," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial Palace. It's the Empress. The laughter stopped. Everyone turned to the main screen. Empress appeared, her face calm but her eyes intense. Captain Vance, I have ordered my fleet to stand down. The admiral responsible for the attack has been arrested. Thank you, Majesty. I appreciate your swift action. I did not do it for you. I did it because it was right. Paused. You could have destroyed many of my ships today. You chose not to. Why? Because that's not why we came. We came to prove that humanity cannot be contained. We came to ask for a better future. Destroying your ships wouldn't have helped either goal. And if we had destroyed you, if the attack had succeeded? Vance considered the question. Then Earth would have known that we tried, that we reached out in peace and were answered with violence. That would have told them something important about the Empire, something that would have shaped their response for generations to come. A response of vengeance. A response of determination. We don't surrender, Majesty. We don't give up. If you had killed us here, other ships would have come, with bombs instead of words, with weapons instead of olive branches. You would have won this battle and lost everything that followed. The Empress was silent for a long moment. You are a remarkable people, she said finally. Terrifying and remarkable. We just want to survive, Majesty. We just want a chance to grow. Yes, I am beginning to understand that, straightened. I am calling an emergency session of the High Council. The containment order will be reconsidered. I cannot promise the outcome, but I promise you will have the chance you asked for. That's all we wanted. Perhaps you wanted exactly what you achieved today, a demonstration that has changed everything. Either way, you have made your point. A ghost of a smile crossed the Empress's ancient face. Safe travels, Captain Vance. I suspect we will meet again. The transmission ended. Vance sank back into her command chair. Around her, the crew waited in silence. Navigator, she said finally, plot a course for home, best speed. Aye, Captain. The Perseverance turned away from Prime, leaving behind the fleet that had tried to destroy it and the empire that was about to change. It slipped into subspace, disappearing from sensors as if it had never existed. Behind them, the galaxy held its breath. News of what had happened spread fast. Within hours, every inhabited world knew the story. A single human ship had reached the throne world, survived an attack by the entire home defense fleet, and left without firing a shot. The implications were enormous. If humans could do this, what else could they do? What did it mean for the balance of power that it held for? What did it mean for species who had spent centuries under rule, dreaming of freedom? On 100 worlds, old resentment stirred. On 100 more, old fears awakened. The galaxy that had been stable, if not peaceful, for 12,000 years was suddenly uncertain. But on Earth, there was only celebration. The Perseverance's mission had been classified, but whispers had spread despite all efforts to contain them. People knew something was happening. They knew their government had taken some kind of action against the containment order. When the first reports came back, encrypted, incomplete but unmistakably positive, celebrations erupted around the planet. In every city, every town, every village, humans looked up at the stars and dared to hope. They had stood up to the greatest empire in the galaxy. They had refused to be caged. They had sent a message that would echo through history. We are humanity. We will not be contained. In her quarters aboard the homeward-bound Perseverance, Captain Vance finally allowed herself to rest. She dreamed of green fields and blue skis. She dreamed of children playing under an open sun. She dreamed of a future where humans and worked together, building something greater than either could achieve alone. It was a good dream. She hoped it would come true. But even if it didn't, even if everything that followed was war and destruction and death, she knew they had done the right thing. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was made of. They had refused to surrender their future to someone else's fear. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as humans always had. As humans always would. The UES Perseverance emerged from subspace 3 days later, sliding back into normal reality at the edge of the Sol system. Earth hung in the distance, a small blue marble against the infinite black. Captain Vance stood on the bridge, watching it grow larger as they approached. She had seen many worlds in her career, but none of them compared to this. Home. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander said, "we're being hailed by Earth Command. They want to know." He paused, reading the message. "They want to know everything." "Tell them we're coming in. Full report will follow in person." Vance allowed herself a small smile. Some things need to be said face to face. The journey to Earth took 6 more hours at conventional speed. The threading drive was too precious and too secret to use unnecessarily. As they traveled, the crew prepared their reports, checked their systems, and tried to process everything they had experienced. They had been gone for 2 months. They had traveled farther than any humans before them. They had stood in the heart of an empire and demanded to be heard. Now they were coming home. The Perseverance docked at Earth Station 1, the largest orbital facility humanity had ever built. A crowd had gathered in the main hangar: military officers, government officials, scientists, reporters, and ordinary citizens who had heard rumors and wanted to see the heroes for themselves. When Captain Vance stepped off the ship, a cheer went up that shook the walls. She stood there, surrounded by her crew, looking out at the sea of faces. These were her people, her species, the billions she had risked everything to protect. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Tears gathered in her eyes, tears she had held back for 2 months of danger and uncertainty. Then she raised her hand, and the crowd fell silent. "We went a prime," she said. Her voice was carried by speakers throughout the station. "We reached the throne world of the Empire. We told them that humanity would not be contained." She paused. They listened. The cheer that followed was the loudest sound any of them had ever heard. 3 weeks later, the diplomatic summit began. It was held on neutral ground, a space station orbiting a dead world that neither species claimed. The delegation arrived in a ship of gleaming silver. The human delegation arrived in a ship of practical gray. Both crews watched each other with cautious curiosity. Captain Vance had been promoted to admiral and appointed as Earth's lead negotiator. She had tried to refuse. She was a soldier, not a diplomat, but the council had insisted. The Empress knew her. The Empress trusted her as much as she trusted any human. That mattered more than any formal training. Empress III came in person, against the advice of her Security Council. She said she owed it to Captain Vance, who had come to Prime alone. If a human captain could show such courage, an Empress could do no less. They met in a simple conference room. No thrones, no platforms, no symbols of rank. Just 2 chairs at a plain table, with their advisors standing behind them. Admiral Vance said, "I see you have been rewarded for your mission." "I've been given more work to do, Majesty. I'm not sure that counts as a reward." The Empress smiled slightly, a sentiment I understand well. She gestured at the papers spread across the table. "Shall we begin?" The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. They argued about territory, which systems humanity could expand into, which would remain space, which would be shared. They argued about technology, what would be exchanged, what would remain secret, how quickly the sharing would happen. They argued about trade, about military matters, about cultural exchange, about 1,000 small details that would shape the relationship between their peoples for generations to come. It was exhausting work. Both sides had competing interests. Both sides had factions at home that opposed any agreement. More than once, the talks nearly collapsed. But they didn't collapse, and the reason they didn't was simple. Both Vance and wanted them to succeed. They had seen each other at their worst, Vance surrounded by enemies, betrayed by her own admiral. They had seen each other at their best, Vance choosing restraint over destruction, choosing wisdom over pride. They understood each other in ways that diplomats and politicians never could. On the 15th day, they reached an agreement. The containment order was officially rescinded. Humanity was recognized as a sovereign power with full territorial rights. Trade agreements were established. Cultural exchanges were planned. A joint scientific committee was formed to study subspace threading technology, not to copy it, but to understand it. Most importantly, a principle was established. Humanity and the Empire were equals, not subjects and rulers, not primitives and elders, equals building a future together. When the agreement was signed, looked across the table at Vance. "You have changed the galaxy," she said. "I hope you understand what you've started." "I hope so too, Majesty." Vance met her gaze. "But I think change was coming whether we started it or not. At least this way we get to shape it." "Perhaps." The Empress rose from her chair. "I am old, Admiral. I have seen many changes in my 8 centuries of life. Some were good, some were terrible. I cannot tell yet which this one will be." "Neither can I, but I'd rather face the unknown standing up than hiding in a cage." Nodded slowly. "Yes, I am beginning to understand that about your people. You would rather die on your feet than live on your knees. It is a strange philosophy, but not without merit. It's kept us alive so far." "So it has." The Empress extended her hand once more. "Until we meet again, Admiral." "Until then, Majesty." They shook hands, 2 leaders, 2 species, 2 futures intertwined. The galaxy would never be the same. News of the agreement spread like fire across the stars. On 100 worlds, species that had lived under dominance began to whisper. If humans could win recognition as equals, what about them? What about their ancient grievances, their forgotten freedoms, their dreams of independence? The Empire did not collapse. It was too old, too strong, too deeply rooted for that. But it changed. Slowly at first, then faster as the pressure built. Reforms were introduced. Subject species were given more autonomy. Trade restrictions were loosened. The iron grip that had held the galaxy together for 12,000 years began to relax. Some called it progress, others called it decay. Historians would argue about it for centuries to come. But everyone agreed on one thing. It had started with a single human ship, appearing where it couldn't possibly be, demanding to be heard. On Earth, Admiral Vance became a legend. She didn't want to be a legend. She wanted to go back to her ship to explore new worlds, to face new challenges. But the Council had other plans. They needed her face, her voice, her story. She became the symbol of humanity's rise, the captain who had stood in the heart of an empire and refused to bow. Schools were named after her. Statues were raised in her honor. Children played games where they pretended to be aboard the Perseverance, dancing through enemy fleets. She bore it all with patience, if not enthusiasm. It was the price of success, a price she was willing to pay. But in quiet moments, alone in her quarters, she thought about the crew members who had made it all possible. Martinez, who had kept the threading drive running through impossible conditions. Williams, who had navigated through unknown space with nothing but math and courage. Who had stood beside her through everything, steady and reliable as the stars themselves. They were the true heroes. She was just the one who gave the orders. Lieutenant, the young intelligence officer, watched the changes unfold from his small office on Prime. He had submitted his report, the one arguing that humanity should be embraced rather than contained. To his surprise, it had been read. To his greater surprise, it had been cited in the Empress's arguments to the High Council. A week after the agreement was signed, he received a transfer notice. He was being assigned to the newly formed Joint Species Initiative, a project designed to build bridges between humanity and the Empire. His family was horrified. Working with humans, treating them as partners, it was unprecedented, unthinkable, a betrayal of everything they stood for. but didn't see it that way. He saw an opportunity, a chance to be part of something new, something that might change the galaxy for the better. On his first day with the initiative, he met a human scientist named Dr. Sarah. She was studying history, trying to understand how the Empire had lasted so long. "We have a lot to learn from you," she admitted. 12,000 years of civilization. How do you even maintain continuity across that span of time? Carefully replied, and with a great deal of stubbornness. She laughed. "That sounds familiar." They talked for hours, about history, about science, about the strange path that had brought their species together. By the end of the day, had made his first human friend. It was, he thought, a good beginning. 5 years passed. The galaxy continued to change. Human ships explored regions of space that had been forbidden to them before. Merchants traded in human markets. Scientists from both species worked together on projects that would have been impossible alone. There were problems, of course. Old prejudices died hard on both sides. Some humans saw every as an oppressor. Some saw every human as an upstart. Conflicts erupted, some violent. Progress was never as fast as optimists hoped or as slow as pessimists feared. But the direction was clear. The galaxy was becoming something new, something that wasn't quite empire, wasn't quite chaos, but a strange blend of both. Admiral Vance retired from active service and took a position at the newly established Diplomatic Academy, training the next generation of human negotiators. She was good at it. She had a gift for seeing both sides of any argument, for finding common ground where others saw only conflict. Her students called her the bridge builder. She pretended not to like the nickname, but secretly she was proud of it. Chief Engineer Martinez returned to the shipyards, where he oversaw the development of new threading drive technology. Under his guidance, the drives became smaller, more stable, more reliable. Within a decade, every human warship would carry one. Lieutenant Commander became captain, commanding his own vessel on missions of exploration and diplomacy. He named his ship the Vance, over Admiral Vance's strenuous objections. "You earned it," he told her. "Deal with it." The Perseverance itself was retired from active service and placed in the Museum of Human Achievement in Geneva. Millions of visitors walked through its corridors every year, touching the walls, imagining what it must have been like to travel so far into danger. Dr. Sarah and Lieutenant published a joint paper on the comparative histories of humanity and the Empire. It became required reading at universities on both worlds, a foundation text for a new field of study called convergent development. The paper's central argument was simple but profound. Despite their differences in age and power, humans had faced similar challenges in their evolution. Both had survived extinction events. Both had struggled to overcome their own violent natures. Both had reached for the stars because staying on the ground meant death. They were more alike than either side wanted to admit, and that similarity, properly understood, was the key to their future together. 20 years after the Perseverance's mission, a memorial was unveiled on Prime. It stood in the Garden of Understanding, a new park built specifically for joint human events. The memorial was a simple design, two hands reaching toward each other, one human and one, almost but not quite touching. Empress III attended the unveiling. She was very old now, over 850 years, and her health was failing, but she insisted on being there. This moment mattered too much to miss. Admiral Vance was there too, white-haired and slower than she had once been, but still straight-backed and strong-eyed. The years had been kind to her, though she would never admit it. They stood together before the memorial, two ancient leaders of two ancient peoples. "I have been thinking," said softly, "about what might have happened if things had gone differently, if we had destroyed your ship, if you had attacked our fleet, if fear had won over wisdom." "I think about it too sometimes," Vance admitted. "Late at night when I can't sleep, all the ways it could have gone wrong. But it didn't. No, it didn't. Turn to look at her. I will die soon. My physicians try to hide it, but I know, perhaps months, perhaps weeks, before I go, I want you to know something. Vance waited. That day when you walked into my chamber alone and unarmed, I thought you were either the bravest being I had ever met or the most foolish. Perhaps both. The Empress smiled. Now I know the truth. You were neither brave nor foolish. You were simply human, and that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Tears gathered in Vance's eyes. Thank you, Majesty. No, thank you, Admiral, for showing us what we had forgotten, for teaching us that change is not something to fear. Looked up at the memorial at the two hands reaching toward each other across the void. My people ruled for 12,000 years by asking one question: who has the most power? You arrived with a different question: who is willing to do whatever it takes? The galaxy is still learning the difference. Are we getting better at it? Slowly, very slowly, but yes, the Empress nodded. We are getting better. The ceremony concluded. The crowd dispersed, but Vance lingered in the garden looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between worlds, human ships were exploring, trading, building. They had come so far in such a short time, from a single world to a respected power, from prisoners to partners. It wasn't perfect. The galaxy was messy and complicated, full of old wounds and new challenges. There would be more conflicts, more crises, more moments when everything hung in the balance. But humanity would face them, as they always had, as they always would. Vance remembered something her grandmother had told her, long ago on a green world under a yellow sun. Humans never give up. No matter how bad things get, we keep fighting. She smiled and whispered the words to the stars. We never give up. Far away, in a region of space that no map had ever charted, a fleet of human vessels drifted silently through the void. They were explorers, pioneers, the vanguard of a species that could not stop reaching for more. Their mission was simple: go further than anyone had gone before. Find what was waiting in the darkness. Bring it home. The fleet commander was young, barely 30 years old. She had grown up hearing stories about Admiral Vance and the Perseverance. She had dreamed of following in their footsteps. Now she was doing exactly that. Commander, her sensor officer reported, I'm picking up something unusual. A structure maybe, big, really big. Can you identify it? Negative. It doesn't match anything in our database. It might be. He paused. It might be something new. The commander smiled. Something new, something unknown, something waiting to be discovered. That was why they were here. That was why humanity had come to the stars. Not for power or territory or dominance, but for the simple, ancient need to know what was over the next horizon. Set a course, she said. Let's go see what we've found. The fleet moved forward into the darkness, toward the unknown. Behind them, incredibly far away, Earth and Prime continued their dance around their respective suns. Two worlds, two peoples, two futures intertwined. And ahead was everything they had not yet imagined. The galaxy was vast and old and full of secrets. Humanity was young and hungry and full of dreams. It was, the commander thought, going to be an interesting journey. She looked forward to every step.